adamant that we have to leave right now. There's something else going on here. All of a sudden, they said he's one place, and then all of a sudden, he's another place. And my name's Terry Wendell, otherwise known as Rock Hill Bigfoot. I have been interested in Bigfoot probably, I guess, most of my life. It's all started growing up on my grandmother's farm back when I was 9, 10 years old. Had some strange things happen to me that at the time I didn't know what it was. We didn't have the internet back then. We had these things called books you had to read. And so you couldn't just Google and find out, what all this was going on. Jump forward to about maybe, I guess, 10 years ago, 8 years ago. And I got into what I'll call my official Bigfoot research. Got started hanging out with a couple of guys that turned into be good friends. And they kind of showed me some things that I really didn't realize. All I had done was watch the TV shows and where they go out stomping through the woods at night and you can't see anything. And that's really not what a lot of Bigfooting is about. These guys just, you go somewhere where you are pretty sure there's activity. You sit, you build a campfire, you just hang out, you talk quietly. And if there are any around and they're interested, they'll find you. And so that's kind of the easy way to do it. And sometimes things happen and sometimes things don't. Yeah, we just call it camping with a purpose. So if you don't have anything happen, you had a good time in the woods.
Hi, I'm Linda Eastburn of Linda Eastburn YouTube channel, and I have a new book out called Threshold to Encounters. It's about 40 years of research and experience with all of these wild cryptids that many of you I know have encountered yourself. You can find it on Amazon.com. Well, tell me, you said that you were a young man at your grandmother's house and some things were happening. You didn't understand exactly what was going on. Can you describe your age and kind of what you were experiencing?
I can. I'll be glad to. I was probably, I guess, 9 or 10 years old. This farm was a generational farm. It'd been in our family for decades, generations. It was about 2,000 acres. It had, oh gosh, 3 or 4 creeks and springs. Old growth farmland or old growth woodlands, cultivated farmland, had a pond and a lake, and it was adjacent to a major South Carolina river. So, aside from being Disneyland for a young boy who liked the outdoors, turns out it was also Disneyland for something else or somebody else that we shared this place with and didn't really realize it. I would go walking in the woods, and it was just kind of odd. Every time I would go out alone in the woods, I would get this feeling that somebody was there watching me, not like a creepy, I'm going to snatch you up type thing. But just that if I turned around fast enough, I'd see somebody duck behind a tree or duck down behind a hill or something. But I never did. And it just kind of was it's hard to explain. It was kind of like a tingly feeling, not quite goosebumps, but just kind of like the wind, like a cool breeze blew across your skin suddenly, but there's no wind. And I've come to realize now that's kind of the signal that I get that we got company when we're out somewhere. I can usually tell. I don't know why. I don't know how. I don't understand how that works, but I would always get that feeling growing up on the farm. And this was an old farmhouse that we stayed in. It was pot-bellied stoves, tin roof, 2-story wraparound porch. The upstairs in the summertime, you opened the windows and prayed there was a breeze because there was no air conditioning. There were no curtains, there were no screens. It was just an old farmhouse in the middle of nowhere at that time. And I would lay in bed at night and I would hear these really weird sounds. Now, I spent a lot of time on the farm and in the woods. I knew what the wildlife there sounded like. I knew what what uh, bobcats sounded like. I knew what rabbits sounded like when they screamed. I knew what cows sounded like at night. They make some weird noises. Um, and I would hear all that stuff, and I knew what it was. And I knew what foxes were. A red fox, if you don't know what it is, will make a noise. It'll make you think there's an 800-pound monster about to come out of the woods and eat your face off. But I knew what all that was. But occasionally at night, I would hear way off in the distance these sounds that I didn't know what they were. It would be, some of them would be like a woman screaming that would turn into a wail. And then I would hear what we now know is the classic Ohio howl, that was just a deep bellowing roar. And I had no clue what that was. And again, we didn't have the internet, so I couldn't Google all this stuff and find out. So I would just, I'd ask my relatives, I'd ask my aunts and uncles that lived there full time, what was this I heard? And their response was always, oh, it was a cow. Oh, it was a deer. No, this wasn't that. It was something else. No, yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. So, okay. Um, the first time I really knew something was up is I'd finished my chores, and it was a hot day. And usually, if I got my chores finished, I could ask my mom, hey, can I go down to the creek? And there's a spring there, go walk in the woods. So on this particular day, I asked, can I take off down to the creek? I'm going to go cool off. It's watercress season. There's probably some watercress growing in the spring. I'll take a ham and cheese sandwich. I'll be back before dark. Is that okay? And this was back in the time when 8, 9, 10-year-old kids could walk in the woods. I knew where I was going. I had been down this path many times. I knew where the spring was. I knew how to get there. But this was a different day, as it turned out. I started walking. There was an access road. There was some timber harvesting, pulpwood harvesting going on at the time. And there was an access road that had been cut from the farmhouse down to partway to the creek that I needed to follow. And I'd walked that road many a time. So I started out and got a little ways down the road, got that feeling that somebody's here with me. And I just didn't think too much about it. And I kept walking, and I got a little further along and happened to notice I came to this spot where there was a pine tree about maybe the size of my leg now, that had been snapped off about 8 feet up in the air. And I mean, like snapped off. It wasn't twisted, but it was snapped. And I thought, well, this is interesting. We haven't had a storm lately that I'm aware of, and I don't see anything else twisted off here, and to match this. But okay, sometimes trees just break in the woods. That happens. So I kept on walking and got a little further down this road, and lo and behold, there's another one, same exact thing, snapped off 8 feet up in the air-ish, and the snapped off parts laying there beside of it. So I thought, okay, this is odd. This is really odd. But I kept going. A little further down, I come to another one, but this one's different. This one was snapped off at the top, pulled up out of the ground with the root ball still on it, and jammed upside down in the hole. At that point, I decided I probably didn't need to go down to the spring that day. So I turned around and went home. Again, it was not a feeling of something's about to get me. It was just I don't really need to be here right now. So I took off and went home. And that's kind of how I got into it. Now, I will tell you, jumping forward, I didn't tell any of my relatives who still live around this area what I do. They had no idea I was a Bigfoot investigator. And I finally mentioned it to one of them. I just got up the courage and just mentioned it to him. He was a cousin of mine who still lives there. And his eyes got as big as saucers. He went pale and he said, "Oh my gosh, I am so glad you told me that. Thank you so much. Let me tell you a story." So it wasn't just me. It turned out that other people there knew about them, but nobody was saying anything because back then Bigfoot was just, you didn't talk about Bigfoot unless you were crazy. There was just nothing, nothing going on about it. The Patterson Gimlin film hadn't even come out at that point yet. So you just didn't say anything. And I was very relieved to find out that somebody else was having the same things happen that I was. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Well, tell me about your cousin's experience. What did he tell you that day when he finally confessed to knowing that there was a Bigfoot in the area?
My cousin, the story that he told me, um, he hunts a lot. He's hunted a lot in that area. He knows the area about as well as I do. He had a couple of hunting dogs that he had had for a long time, and they were really not afraid of anything. Now we didn't have bear in that area. We're a little too far down in the south to have bear sightings or anything going on. Occasionally, we'd have a bobcat. There were no coyotes or anything around at that point. They hadn't made it this far east. So his hunting dogs were pretty familiar with anything that they were going to run into. So he takes off walking. He's got his shotgun and he's out either bird hunting, squirrel hunting, deer hunting, whatever comes up. And deer were everywhere on this property. You could not walk out in the morning and not see one standing in the driveway. It's just, they were everywhere. So he takes off walking and his dogs are with him. And he gets to the edge of this ravine. And all of a sudden, his dogs just start screaming and going crazy and barking and go basically just dive down into the ravine before he can even get up to see what's going on. And he hears them howling and snarling. And then all of a sudden, he hears them start whimpering. And one dog comes flying back up over the top of the ravine, followed by the second dog the same way, like something had picked them up and thrown them. Both dogs hit the ground, whimpering and crying, and took off running, and they went home. He said he has never had anything happen like that before. He heard something down in the ravine, but he said at that point, I got this weird feeling that if my dogs were scared of it, I didn't need to go poke around too much more. So he took off home. But he said at the end of that, he said, thank you so much. I have wanted to tell somebody that for so long. And I am just so glad to find out what you do and that you had something else going on too.
So were these isolated experiences both of you had, or were there other experiences out there on that 2,000 acres?
Um, that was the main. I haven't really heard from any of my other relatives there yet. I suspect there are stories. I really haven't dug too deeply into it yet, and I kind of intend to go back and do that. But a lot of them that were there would have been there when I was around, have moved on, started families of their own. So there's a new generation there who I'd love to start talking about to see, or talking to see if they have had any experiences. But those were the definitive experiences that I had, again, other than just the odd sounds and the feeling like I was never alone in the woods. I've never seen one. I have, in my adult career, I have seen shadows with glowing eyes walk through camp, things like that. But I have never actually seen one where you go, oh, there's Mr. Bigfoot standing there in the road. And that's what I want next. I'm waiting for that. But
Ideally, that would be it, right? Have you ever
oh,
gone back and asked any of the surrounding neighbors or anyone else in the community about any sightings in that area?
I have not. There's not many. This was decades ago. Most of the neighbors, again, like family, have either passed on or they have moved away. However, there have been Bigfoot sightings in this area. I'm not going to tell you where the area is, but there have been. It's on the BFRO sighting report. You can go find several sightings that have happened there, not too far away from here. So I would not be surprised if this was not a more common thing. And now that I've got a little time on my hands, I really would like to get back in that area and kind of look around and see what's going on. The house that I stayed in, the old farmhouse, is gone now. It's long since fallen in, and things have changed. But again, this is a perfect environment. There's several things you need For a large mammal, large predator, whatever, you need cover. There's tons of cover. You need water sources. Got those plenty. You need game. We've got that aplenty as well. So, this, in my mind, this ticks all the boxes for a perfect habitat.
The BFRO reports that are in the area, how detailed do they get? I mean, did they actually see a physical Bigfoot, or was it just more like yours where you have signs of Bigfoot?
One that comes to mind, they weren't very detailed. A lot of times the BFRO won't share a lot of details with the public. But this particular one that I'm thinking of was probably about 20 miles to closer away from this, closer to another small town that's nearby this area. And it was actually reported that someone saw something that, again, this was a shadowy figure. Nobody said, "Oh, hey, here's Mr. Bigfoot." But they heard howls. They had all kinds of other things get moved around. And someone saw something moving in the dark that they couldn't identify. It was definitely not a person. And this was actually in a less rural area than where I've been talking about with the farm. So, but again, this was close to a major South Carolina river. And I think we know from experience now, they like the classic line from Boggy Creek, they travel the creeks and the rivers. There's a lot of truth in that. So there are plenty of ways that they could get around in this area without anyone ever noticing them if they chose to.
Absolutely. And a lot of people do see them in less remote areas anymore, even dumpster diving and just kind of in just right on the border of maybe a park area or a camping site.
This area that I'm speaking of at the time was a new subdivision that was going in that was on the edge of some woods. And that's not surprising. I've seen reports from other places in the country where when we start invading their territory and putting in new subdivisions that are on the very very edges of the towns, cities, municipalities, whatever, they're very rural to begin with. And I've seen reports of people, even while the construction is going on, the construction crews will find footprints in the muddy roads that they've just laid while the houses are still under construction. So, we're kind of pushing into their habitat, and that happens.
Have you heard any stories about any repercussions for those construction people as they're moving into those territories?
I have not. And truly, I don't think they're aggressive by nature. That's just my opinion. I think that when you hear the stories about, oh, Bigfoot scared me out of the woods, he was screaming at me, he was throwing logs. My question is always, well, what were you doing? Um, did you Was Mr. Bigfoot on his way out to get lunch or supper for the kids? Mrs. Bigfoot said, go down to your favorite fishing spot and go get some trout. Well, you're camped in his, unbeknowingly, in his famous, his favorite kitchen spot. And he's got to get to the trout at the beach where he goes fishing, but he gets there tonight and you're in a tent in your way and he can't get there. Well, he knows if he goes home with, it's empty handed, Mrs. Bigfoot's not going to be happy and it's not going to be a good night for anybody. So his job at that point is to move you out of the way so he can get food. I think a lot of that is you'll see that it's not, we're going to snap you in half or anything like that. It's just, hey guys, this is our territory, and they don't understand land boundaries like we do. A fence to them, they don't understand that. So it's one of these deals where you just kind of have to, at some point, figure out how you're going to live together with them and just deal with the fact that this is going on and you're not crazy.
In the process of growing up and kind of getting away from that 2,000 acres where you had an inkling that something was really happening out there, You started doing some more serious research. Tell me about that transition and kind of how that got started.
Okay, well, I live in Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is not far away from the Uwharrie Mountain Range and Forest in North Carolina. And I met a couple of fellows. I got to a point in my life where it was like, you know what, I need to know what this is. All this time I've spent wondering about this. I'm not getting any younger. I need to know what this is. I've got questions. So I had no clue what to do. I started looking on social media, on Facebook at the time, and happened to bump into a couple of guys who had their own kind of little two-man operation, and they were going out in the Uwharrie and having things happen to them. So I messaged one of them, told him who I was, what I was thinking about doing, and would they be interested in having somebody come along with them? And got a phone call from him, and we chatted for a good hour, and both of us figured out that neither of us, the other one was not a crazed axe murderer, so we're okay going in the woods together. So he said, "Yeah, matter of fact, we're going in about a week or so. Why don't you come join us?" So I did. And these were the guys who taught me you don't go stomping around through the woods. You don't need to. We were at a campsite. It's a remote campsite, but we were at a campsite up in the Uwharrie. And of course, everybody knows now, if you've seen Finding Bigfoot, the second or third, first season, I think second or third episode was the Uwharrie. One of these guys at the time was BFRO and told BFRO about the activity in this area. And sadly, he regrets it to this day because there were so many people up there all of a sudden that they just drove them away back into the woods. But they've come back after all this has died down. So anyway, we're sitting there, and I've never done this before in my life, and it's getting dark, and I'm thinking, well, when do we get up and go stomping through the woods? We get the headlamps on, we get all geared up. What do we do? We're not doing anything. So I sit there for a little while, and the sun's going down. We've had our evening meal, and I'm thinking, I don't know about these guys. I have no clue what I'm doing, but this isn't what I expected. So I just said, guys, I've worked all day. I drove up here. I'm tired. I'm just going to go crawl in my tent. If anything happens, it's getting late. If anything happens, wake me up. I'll be out. I promise you. And this fellow looked over at me and said, "Wait." I said, "What do you mean, wait?" He said, "Just wait." I thought, okay, that's a little weird. Okay. So we sat there, moon's coming out. It's night, and nothing's going on. And it's probably another hour has gone by. And I said, this is crazy. They're goofing with me. So I just said, guys, really, I tell you what, I'm going to go and crawl into my sleeping bag and just wake me up if something happens. I'll be there. And the same guy looked at me and said, wait, just wait. Probably about 15 minutes after that, we hear coming through the woods, thump, and a rock hits right in our camp. They weren't trying to hit us. They weren't throwing this at us. It was just kind of like hey guys, just letting you know we're here. And at that point, I thought, okay, it's on now. Okay, let's see what happens. Because I'm a newbie at this. Let's see what they do. They just sat there. One of the fellows had at this point it was a new FLIR, but this was years ago. This is an older one. So he actually captured the rock coming in on video. You can see it. It's white hot. It flashes across the screen. I've got the video up on my social media if anybody wants to go look at it. I was running an audio recorder at the time and was able to sync up the conversation that we were having while he was searching for the rock. So if anybody's interested, you can go check that out. But long story short, he was able to walk the other fellow in on the rock because it was clearly glowing white hot in all the background stuff that had been there. And they recovered that rock and they gave it to me. And this is that rock. It's got the
Wow.
date on it that we were out.
Hmm.
Now, to them, this is a pebble.
Put that back up because I spoke, and when I speak, my picture comes up, and I'm just going to be silent for a little bit and just hold that up there.
Okay.
Thank you for letting the audience see that. We've had issues with that before, and everyone
Yeah.
gets really mad at me because they see my face instead of the neat
Yeah.
obstacle they're trying to look at.
But at that point, I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked.
I can imagine. It sounds like it was an interesting way to get started for sure.
It was indeed. It was, and it was very eye opening because again, I had no clue. Everything I saw was on television, and it's, I've since learned, no disrespect meant to anyone. I'm not trying to throw any shade, but TV Bigfoot is often different than Bigfoot in real life.
Yeah, exactly. We just made the film Byways of Bigfoot and went out and tried not to just do that. We're just looking around,
Mm-hmm.
and be a little bit more authentic with some of that research. But
Yeah.
if you did something ongoing, sometimes that might be difficult as well.
Yeah.
But tell me, since then, since you got started, what are your experiences? What have you found? What are the images that you've collected? What can you tell us?
Oh gosh, where do we start? I don't really shoot video in the woods anymore, except as kind of a diary vlog for me to keep up with what goes on. Um, Human beings make terrible data recorders. Our brains just don't work that way. So I record things so I can keep up with all the details and not let anything squeak in or get changed. So I really, my intention anymore, when I first started, I do video production work. And when I first started out, I thought, if I can get pictures of Bigfoot, surely, I know what I'm doing. I don't know why everybody else has all this trouble with anything. Arrogance, complete human arrogance on my part. Um, so at some point, I really just quit trying. Um, if you have a video that's blurry, that's not definitive, it's a blob squatch. It's not real. On the other side of that coin, if Mr. Bigfoot were to walk out of the woods and say, Terry, come here a minute. I want to talk to you. My people and I have decided that it's time for us to tell our story and we want you to film it. So you go ahead and get set up. I'm just going to stand here and wait. And I filmed that and I got the most perfect photo, the most perfect video of Bigfoot anybody has ever seen. It's fake. It's too good. It's CGI. It's not real. So you can't win. So I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody anymore. I know Bigfoot is real from some of the things that I've had happen to me in the woods. I've been poked in my shoulder through my tent wall by one night. I've had all kinds of weird things happen, and I've seen stuff that's not Bigfoot, but it's in relation to Bigfoot. So it's all just, I've if I happen to film anything, fine. But my goal is not to be the guy on Time magazine with the picture of Bigfoot. I don't care about that. I want to know what's going on. I genuinely want to know what's going on.
Well, I think there are a lot of people that would agree with you on that one. They want to know what's going on, and they want to have more specific information. What do you think Bigfoot is?
Okay, well, before I answer that, what do I think Bigfoot is? Let me say before I talk about that, I'm aware there are as many opinions about what Bigfoot might be as there are people to have those opinions. What I'm going to share with you right now is mine. If we don't agree, that doesn't mean we can't still be friends and go hang out and eat pizza together. It just means we have differences of opinions. I'm okay with that because if you listen to other people, sometimes you learn things, even if it's stuff not to do, you can always learn things. So I never poo poo anybody, but this is what I think with all of my experience that I've had. And I've got some very good friends who are Native American. I have chatted with them. One of them I refer to as my Bigfoot aunt. She really got me started on this as well, onto this part of the journey. But I think Bigfoot are a people. They're like us in some ways, but they're not like us in a lot of other ways. I think that they do live in family units, possibly tribes, clans. I don't know how big the group is, but there's got to be at least some kind of a family unit. People have reported seeing, younger, smaller ones and females. And a lot of people don't realize, they think there's just a Bigfoot, that he just roams around the country, but there's way more than just one Bigfoot. So there has to be a breeding population, but some of the behaviors that I've run into indicate an intelligence. It's a different type of intelligence, I think, than ours, but it's an intelligence. I do think they have a language. Ron Moorhead and Scott Nelson, oh dear Lord in heaven, those guys. I have no doubt they have a language. In fact, I have heard similar sounds to the Sierra sounds up in the mountains of North Carolina. It was so clear. I thought it was one of the other guys with us who was just playing the Sierra sounds, just kind of listening to them in his tent, and got up the next morning and no, he had nothing like that. And one of our rules about anytime I go out with anybody, one of our rules is we don't spoof, we don't joke. That's a great way to destroy your credibility. Nobody's going to come out in a Bigfoot mask and that kind of stuff. We don't do that. So I think they have a language. I don't understand what I heard, much like Scott Nelson discussed, but it was two somebody's talking about something. I don't know what they were saying, but they were having a conversation back and forth. And that went on for probably 15 or 20 minutes. Now, of course, I usually carry a recorder with me, a little audio recorder that I just hang up in the top of my tent when I'm out somewhere. And of course, that night I forgot to turn it on. Go figure. So I didn't get anything, but I heard it clear as day. That denotes intelligence. So, you start now getting into, well, who was here first, us or them? I don't know. Who is more adaptable? Who would it make sense? Who came first, us or them? I don't know. But look at them and look at us. Who is better adapted to live in nature between the two of us? We have to have, if we go out in the woods, we have to take special food with us. We have to purify our water. We can't drink out of the streams and creeks. Excuse me. We have to carry special clothes with us and shelters to sleep in. They sleep wherever they want to. When they get tired, they make a nest. They flop over. They can drink straight out of the water supplies. They can eat, anything they run across. They don't need clothes. So who's better suited to be the original people on this planet? You tell me. But again, I don't know. And so that's, again, why I'm out doing what I'm doing, is I want to find answers to what's going on.
What do you think is going to be the key to finding that answer?
For me personally, when I see one in the broad daylight, when I see one walk out in the road and look at me and like, hey, whatever, that's going to be, for me, that's going to be the definitive part. My wife, God bless my wife, I have a wonderful wife. She puts up with all of my Bigfoot stuff. But she often asks me, well, what'll happen when that happens to you? What'll you do? And my answer is, I don't know. At that point, I've answered at least that question, but that's going to open a whole nother can of worms of, okay, now they're real for sure. How do they live? Where are they from? What do they do? So I don't know. And I've learned that I don't know is a perfectly acceptable answer a lot of times in this stuff, because there are no experts here. We don't know. We have opinions. We base what we think on situations that are common to other Bigfoot reports and sightings. But we can't sit down with Mr. Bigfoot or have not been able to yet and say, okay, this is an app. What do you call this? What's your word for this? We can't do that. So we're still looking. I'm still looking. And I probably will be. It just it'll change a little bit how I go about things. I have seen myself change over the course of all of this. I spoke earlier about, oh, I can get video of Bigfoot. What's wrong with all these people? To going, yeah, there's something else going on here. I can't explain. Um, there's, again, Ron Moorhead, his book, Quantum Bigfoot. That is a great read. I would recommend that to anyone. That makes a lot of things click for me. You start talking about cloaking, and there are people that say that's impossible, that can't happen. Well, if you follow Ron along in his book, and if you start kind of having a basic understanding of quantum physics, depending on what version of string theory you follow, there can be as many as 10 or 11 dimensions that we can't access. Maybe they can. Maybe they have the ability to step in and out of different dimensions that we can't access. The Native Americans pretty much all have stories that Bigfoot walks with one foot in the physical world and one foot in the spirit world. And I would tend to agree with that the more I learn. I can't explain it. I don't know the mechanism behind it, but I've seen things that just, I got nothing. There's a point when I just go, okay, I got nothing. I saw that. I got nothing. I've seen a portal open before. Had you told me before that, if you came to me talking about portals, I'd have probably looked at you and gone, oh, portals, bless your heart. Yeah, okay. Then you see one open. Okay, it's real. Now I got to deal with that. So,
well, now you're going to have to explain to me what that looked like and what were the circumstances around it. What happened?
I was in an area. I have an NDA that I had to sign to go here. This is an area. There's a great book on Amazon about it. I've got an image, if you want me to put it up on the screen, of that book cover. This is the cover of that book. There's a second one that's in the works right now, but I am the Terry in that book. And I can tell you this stuff is real. So can't tell you where this is, but we
Well,
were.
now were you the one that went through the box, the portal, or were you the one of them just looking at it, seeing
I was
that?
looking
I
at it.
know
I
that
was
story.
looking at it.
Okay,
Oh, you know the story? Okay,
I know
yeah.
the story
Okay.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was one that was watching it. We had gone in, my buddy and I that I mentioned that got me started in this had been asked by this group to come down, and we knew some of these guys, and had we been asked to come down and just hang out with them and see what we thought. So, okay, great, let's go. So we packed up and went. Now we're going for Bigfoot. We're Bigfoot guys. And we got down there, and there's a whole lot more going on in that area than Bigfoot. Um, so that was kind of an eye opener. But there were 4 teams that were assigned to go into this meadow. And the meadow makes a dog leg on one end, and you can't see around the edge of it. So the idea was all of us were going to, there were 3 teams on the ground that were going to go in, and each team would have eyes on at least one other team. And then there was an overwatch group that was higher up on a forestry service road that was overseeing everything. And they were going to, we didn't know what they were going to do, but they were kind of the overwatch. So we all had radios and we were communicating back and forth. And my team was the last to go into the meadow. And we heard something. There's a swampy area right as you enter. We heard something there. We stopped, and I got in on the radio and called in and said, "Hey, this is team 4. We just heard something. Are we going to stop and check it out? Is that okay? Just want to let you know what's going on." And so they said, they called back and said, "Yeah, that's fine. Just let us know when you're done." It turned out to be a beaver. It was a beaver that slapped his tail on the water, and we got a great thermal image of it. So okay, it's a beaver, so we can write that off. So we called back in and said, well, we're not far away from where you had us originally scheduled to be. Can we just hang here? We can see what we need to see. Can we just hang here? Because we're already kind of set up and sitting around. And they, Overwatch came back and said, yeah, that's fine. Just let us know what happens. So we're sitting there. Now, my buddy and I, would always do this thing where if we're in an area that we've never been in before, we'll go walk the area in the daytime and we'll walk around and go, okay, that's a big stump down there. So that's going to look like a Bigfoot at night. So we know what that is. Okay. Over here, there's a big bush or something over here. That's going to look like a Bigfoot at night. So we know what that is. Okay. Over here is, this dark area. We know what that is. So we knew we had been down there in the daytime and had walked this whole area, and we knew what was in the open out there, and there was nothing in the open. So we're sitting there, and I didn't have any thermal gear at the time. I was just visual, and I think I had a still camera and a recorder. So we're sitting there, and we're all facing the 4 points of the compass back to back, sitting kind of on the ground. And I hear my buddy say, "What is that square thing out there?" And it didn't dawn on me what he said for a minute because it didn't sink into my brain. And he said it again. "What is that square thing out there?" And it dawned on me, there is no square thing out there. What's going on? So I leaned over to him and said, "What you got?" He said, "I don't know. Take a look." I leaned over, and there it was. It was a square about the size of a small pickup truck, and it was getting larger. It looked like if you had a one of those translucent shower curtains and you shined a light through it. It looked like that, kind of foggy. It was strange. The edges of it were almost like a vapor, kind of a wavy, like a heat wave or something, but it was a vaporish look, and it was getting larger. So there was another person, a woman with us in that group who had much better night vision gear, and she said, "What do you got?" And my buddy said, "Okay, let me point you in on it." So she's the one that actually got the recording of it, and it's crystal clear. You can see it crystal clear. Um, so we called in and said, "Guys, we don't know what we got here, but we got something going on." And we described it to them, and they said, "Okay, walk us in on it." And we're like, "What?" Now we noticed anytime I go in the woods, and most of us go in the woods, we always carry some kind of stuff with us, just some basic gear. So we all had these little backpacks on, but I noticed as we were walking down this trail, there were two guys ahead of us that had huge backpacks on. It's like, what are you guys like going to stay here for a week or something? What's going on? Well, we found out these two guys had every intention of going into the portal. This had happened to them before. They had observed it before. They wanted somebody there, my buddy and I, who had never experienced it before, as kind of a control. So they didn't tell us anything about this. So we're sitting there like, what in the heck is going on? And we hear the walks in on it. And it's like, okay. So we start telling them, okay, walk forward, okay, turn to your left, a little more, no, your other left. And when they would get close to it, it would fade out and shrink and disappear. And then it would reopen again in another spot a few seconds later in the meadow in another area. So finally, they got to a point where they got close enough to it that they could walk into it. Now, I don't know from my vantage point, looking on the FLIR that I was looking at, I don't know if they actually walked into it or not. They say they did, and I will take them at their word for that because I know these guys. But I can't say definitively that they did. If you have a 100-watt light bulb and you hold a 20-watt light bulb up in front of the 100-watt light bulb, you don't see the 20-watt bulb anymore. That's kind of what it looked like on the FLIR to me. So either their signatures were masked by the brighter glow behind them, or they went into it. And again, they say they went into it. I'm nobody to dispute them. And they've talked about what it was like, and they realized they needed to get out. So that was that was one. I slept with my mini pew pew on my vehicle that night. We had all kinds of things happen that night. We had men in black show up. It was crazy. So my
Well,
buddy and I
let's go
were,
back. I want to ask a few questions about what those
uh-huh.
guys experienced when they were in the portal. How long were they in there, first of all?
I
And
don't
then,
know.
mhm.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. So you don't know the time frame that they were actually inside that portal, but what did they experience in there? Did they describe it to you?
They we had a debrief afterwards, and they described it as being, you felt like you were kind of walking through jello a little bit, and things got cooler, and you felt like things were closing in on you. They couldn't see, when they walked in, they couldn't see the surrounding area, the forest and the meadow and everything. It was like they had walked into a tunnel. They could still see back, they could hear us, and they apparently just decided, let's get out of here, because we don't know what's going to happen. Now, again, I this is weird. I don't remember a lot of this chatter that was going on. Um, I was so just stunned that my brain was almost in lockup mode. When you see something that's kind of traumatic, your brain tries to keep you from stressing and freaking out. And I guess that's what was going on with me. Looking back on the recordings, yeah, I can hear now what they were saying, and what the chatter was on the radio. But truly, at that point, I don't remember a whole lot. I remember them walking, what I'll just say was in front of it. And from that point, it's kind of like a blur. And then I, all of a sudden they're back, this thing's gone, and we're getting a call on the radio that there's somebody in camp that's just shown up. Now, this is, wee hours of the morning. And this person had just shown up in camp, was demanding to talk to the group leader, and they had evidence, or they had information that Bigfoot was in a particular place, and we all needed to pack up and come with them right now and go see this, or we'd miss it. So they needed to talk to somebody. And that was really weird, because who knew that we were there and what we were doing? This is a campground. Who knew?
So
So
you said that, and was this the person that you described as Men in Black?
men in black don't always wear black. A lot of that's a misnomer. It's more of a behavior. They act like, they don't have an understanding of, um, just general behavior, and how to interact with human beings. Um, this woman had driven that. Well, excuse me. This woman had been driven there by her 15-year-old son in a Mustang. She pulled up in the middle of the camp in the middle of the night, walked over to the first person she found, and demanded that she speak to the person who was in charge. And at that point, we were packing up anyway. So we just said, okay, we're coming back. Um, and when we got the word what was going on, it was like, okay, this is really weird. Yeah, I will add, by the way, my job going back, I was behind the woman who got the video. That was the only one of that time of the portal. My job was to put my hand on her shoulder and make sure that wherever she went, I went, that she was getting back if anything happened, and who knows what would happen, but that was my job. So we all got back. Um, Walk up, and there's this woman talking to the other person there, demanding that she speak to the lead guy, and she's appeared to be drunk or high on something. She was not acting like a normal human being. Just complete disregard for social norms. At one point, she walked away from our campfire, lifted up her skirt, and just urinated right in front of everybody, and no big deal. So at that point, it's like, this is too weird. About that time, when all this was going on, we noticed a black pickup truck that pulled into the area we were in, and the lights were out, no markings, and backed into one of the furthest spots away from us. And we're just sitting there like, okay, this is getting more interesting. A couple of guys that were with this group, they were current and or former military, and I really don't want to know what they did, but they just kind of disappeared back into the darkness, and I had every idea where they were going. They were going to keep an eye on the truck. Well, the truck stayed there the whole time this was going on. Um, the woman just was adamant that we had to leave right now. We had to go there. All of us had to go there. There's only one way in this place, and you'll never find it if I don't take you there. And we're like, yeah, nah, this is not happening. No, 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 this is not happening. So the lead guy, um, his career was military intelligence. He began to question her as if he was interrogating someone, and he's very good at this. And you know how a lot of times when the police are doing an investigation, they'll ask you the same question 3 or 4 different ways to see if your answer matches. So that's what he was doing, and everything matched. In fact, she started telling him, "Well, you know me. We went to school together." And he's just looking at her like, "No, we didn't. No, we didn't." "Yeah, yeah, we did. Do you remember Professor so and so and so and so?" And he said, "Yeah, tell me about him." Now, this is information you could have probably found in public domain, but it would be very odd for something like that to happen. This was just there's I don't believe in coincidences since I've gotten into this. There's just no coincidences. So this is going on, and he's talking to her, and finally she just kind of realizes we're not leaving. So she goes back over, gets in her car, and they drive off into the darkness. And then the black truck, a few minutes later, still no lights, pulls out and heads out.
You think
So
they were together, the black truck and the lady?
I don't know. I can only speculate on that. Again, I don't think there's such a thing as a coincidence in this kind of stuff, but I have no proof, and anything I do would be speculation. So it's just very odd that it seemed to happen all at the same time. That's about as far as I am willing to go on that.
And especially in
Um,
the middle of the night like that. About what time of night was it?
oh, this was in the wee hours of the morning. It was early. At this point, it was early in the morning. I guess three, something like that, 2:30. And at that point, when everything settled down, we just went back and climbed in our tents. My buddy and I slept in the front seats of my SUV. Like I said, I had my mini pew pew sitting up on the dashboard, and my keys were right there, ready for us to leave. We had pointed the vehicle out in case anything else happened. But it's very weird. That night, I slept really well, but I had a dream that a dozen Bigfoot had walked out of the woods, stood around our vehicle, and turned their backs around to our vehicle, and we couldn't see anything outside the windows. Now, I'm not prone to have really strange dreams. I didn't eat anything that would have made me have any kind of crazy dreams. That was one where I woke up the next morning and went, "Did I dream that, or was that real?" I mean, it was kind of it was just like that feeling. I asked my buddy. He said, "No, I didn't have anything like that." When I woke up, he was snoring. So I don't
Did you
know.
feel that in this dream that these Bigfoot were protecting you or keeping you
I
from
did.
seeing something?
No, well, I think both. I think they were there. And this is all again supposition. If this was not a dream, or even if it was a dream, I think it was a message that, guys, you stumbled into something here that you don't understand, and we don't want you to get hurt. We don't want you to get into anything you can't handle. So just take this as our way of saying there's some things right now that you probably don't need to mess with. Now that
Was
shook me up really bad. It took me several days to figure out how I was going to tell my wife about that. I figured, sure as the world, I was going to tell her. I knew I had to tell her because she was going to know that something weird went on as soon as we started talking. And I figured at some point I was going to walk out the back door, and she was going to have two guys with a white jacket that buttons up the back waiting on me. But that one, that one still to this day sticks with me. I can't explain all that stuff. We had more things happen.
Well, let's go back a minute on this. Was that your only time there, or have you been back before or since?
No, that was my first time there. Let me think. I don't think I've been back since. My buddy has. I've just not had the opportunity. It's never worked out. I do want to go back because again, I got questions, and there's more things now that I know that would be useful, that would help me kind of figure out what's going on. Um,
The other
but
question I have is, the black truck and the lady and all of that sort of thing. Do you know if that type of incident has happened there before? Has anyone approached them before or
I
since?
don't know. I don't know. I don't believe so, but I don't know. So I can't say anything definitive on that. I will say that after some time had passed, the gentleman who was interviewing the lady um, got in touch with her. She had given him her contact information, and he figured, yeah, right. It's just I'm going to call this, and this is going to be Pizza Hut or something. He called, and it was her, and she said, "Now, who are you? Tell me who you are." And he explained, well, I'm the one that you spoke with in this area the night that your son drove you into the area. And she said, I don't know what you're talking about. Are you sure? Who are you? And he had a long conversation with her. And I'm convinced, based on what he said, and that again, he was interviewing her in some pretty strict methodology. Um, I'm convinced from what he said that she has no recollection of that. I, I don't know how, I don't know why, but she could answer questions about the university that he graduated from, about the professors that were there, about the layout of the campus, about the classrooms, how they were structured. A lot of that stuff, I don't know that you could find, um, in public records, and a lot of it had changed since they were there. So
Did he ever find out for sure if they were classmates?
that I don't know. I don't know if I don't recollect. So I don't know.
Well, you also mentioned that there were other things that happened there that night. Can you tell me about some of that?
Well, it wasn't that particular night, but it was another. We had gone out. I guess this was my second time there. You're right. We had gone out on another trip, and this is in the book. Um, they had an area that we wanted to go, that they wanted to go research and see if this was another potential hotspot. They'd found it on Google Maps and needed to go get feet on the ground in this area. So we went, and we were packed up, and we're going to stay a day or so. It was a pretty arduous hike. We basically climbed a mountain to get to this place. It was a 30 or so degree incline, and I'm usually the guy with the extra camera or so. My pack is usually a lot heavier than the other people's, and we were climbing up this steep mountain, and unbeknownst to us, the Forestry Service had gone in sometime before that and done a controlled burn there. So not only was it steep and covered with debris, it was also covered in about 6 or 7 inches full of ash. And you would take 3 steps up this embankment and slide back 2. And I was taking a beating. I was to the point where I was just I was trying to traverse, back and forth and back and forth, because you couldn't go straight up. And I got to the point where I was thinking, well, if I drop my pack, I can tie some paracord around this, and I'll just get up to the next tree, and I'll pull my pack up after me. But fortunately, I didn't have to do that. We made it up this embankment, this cliff, and crested the top, and we were on a ridge, and we were going to make camp in a no longer used Forestry Service road bed that was closed off. So I had a tent. I and one of the other guys had a tent. Everybody else was sleeping in hammocks. So they were hanging their hammocks, off of the edge of this side of the other side of this cliff, and you could see for miles and miles. You could see the next ridge line. It was beautiful. So I put my tent up in the roadbed, and we were all just basically just burned out when we got there. We were exhausted. We had our evening meal, talked a little bit, and then just cleaned up as best we could from all the ash and just curled in our hammocks and our tents. Well, the tent that I sleep in is a little one man tent, and this particular tent in this particular bag, there was not enough room to put the bag inside the tent. I had an old USMC ILBE system. It's basically a big dump truck of a backpack, and so I just left it outside. It was nice weather. It wasn't supposed to rain, so I just propped it up on the embankment right beside my tent and went to bed. And these pictures are in the Meadow Project book. I have one I can show you, or you can look it up in the book if you want. I would highly recommend getting this
Why
book.
don't you give us a why don't you give us a visual of that so we know what you're talking about?
All right, well, let me show you. Before I do that, I'll put this up there. I went to sleep and I woke up during the night. And one of the things I've learned as a Boy Scout, and I was a Boy Scout, if you're in the woods and you wake up in the middle of the night, lay still, be quiet, listen, and see if you can figure out what woke you up. Is it wildlife that you need to be concerned about? Do you need to go outside to the bathroom? What is it that woke you up? So I laid there. I didn't hear anything. I didn't need to go out on a nature call. But this time I'm laying there, I saw what looked like somebody flashing a headlamp on my tent, just back and forth and around. And my thought was, okay, well, somebody else got up out of their hammock and they went to go to the bathroom, and that's what's going on. And this is their headlamp. They're going back to get in their tent. So I didn't think anything else of it. I fell over and went to sleep. Again, we were all exhausted. I woke up the next morning, and here is what I saw. This is my backpack. And if you'll notice, there is a stick laying inside my hip belt. It goes over one piece and under the other piece. That stick was not there the night before. I did not put that stick there. There was nowhere for that stick to come from. There were no sticks around my tent. There were no trees around my tent that stick could have come from. Where did that come from? It kind of makes me wonder, did someone see that I was struggling and gave me a walking stick? Now, I'm not trying to make this about me, but that has happened before on, not to me, but has happened. I've heard other people talk about, things like that happening. So I called a couple of people over, looked at it, and said, did anybody do this? And of course, nobody did. I said, okay, no big deal. So we had to get packed up and go back to meet our ride, and we had to get there at a certain time. So we had to get going. So we packed up, hiked back, met our ride, got back, got cleaned up at base camp. While we were sitting around at base camp, I just said, by the way, guys, who was out of their tent last night? Nobody was out of their tent. Nobody had gotten out of their tent. So I did a little research, talked to some people that I know that have been doing this for a good while. And one of them said, oh, you saw flashlight eye shine. It's very rare. There are reports that they can light up an area with their eyes glowing. It's not eye shine, it's eye glow. Now, how that works, I have no clue. You would think that if you had light coming out of your eyes, you wouldn't be able to see. So I have no clue, but I did a little research into it, and lo and behold, there are reports of things called flashlight eye shine. I'm guessing that's maybe what I saw. Again, I didn't open the tent, didn't see what was going on. So all I can say is this eye shine supposedly happened. And then I wake up and I've got a stick that appears to be a walking stick gift in my pack. Where do you go from there? I didn't see what put the stick there. So I can't say definitively. I couldn't stand up in a court of law and say, yes, Your Honor, this is what happened. But it kind of fits with the things that we have heard other people talk about, gifting, things like that. So I used the hiking stick on my way out, left it propped up at a tree when we got to the edge of the woods to get picked up. and just said kind of out loud to the woods, "Thank you guys, I appreciate it."
Well, I
Go
know there have
figure.
been some really, really strange things happen in the meadow
Oh, oh
that
yeah,
you just cannot explain. Lots of,
yeah.
sound and just phenomenal things. And
Missing
I'm
missing
assuming that's,
time, missing
yeah, tell me about
time.
some of the missing time stories up there.
I have not been there to experience that, but there was an individual who just passed away recently. He was wearing one of those little Garmin tracking units, and those things they will track you. They will leave breadcrumbs so you can go back and find your way out if you get lost, and it tells you what time you were there. So you've got a timestamp on it. He apparently went from one area, one position, to another position on the entire different side of this hill in a few seconds. It's not possible. But they've got the track from his GPS that corroborates it. How do you explain that? I have no clue. He doesn't remember it. To him, nothing unusual happened. He was just walking. But all of a sudden, they said he's one place, and then all of a sudden he's another place. How did that happen? That's the only one that I know about the details of. I know there have been others, but that was probably one of the most unusual ones.
Well, it sounds like the whole area there has some type of an anomaly that's a time space warp that just
There,
doesn't behave like our normal science tells us that reality should behave.
I agree. There again, we don't know. We go back to the quantum theory stuff. We are three-dimensional beings. We move around in three dimensions. We actually live in four dimensions, but we can't control time. So we're three-dimensional beings. But what if there are other dimensions that we can't access with our senses? Um, that could be some ways to explain some of this. Again, quantum physics, if you get into it, this quantum physics explains what we're witnessing. Don't always understand how it works, but it explains what we're seeing. So, what makes more sense? That this is going on, or that we're all crazy. And I don't think all of us are crazy. Some of us might be. Who knows? I'm not making any judgments, but for this many people to experience the same thing in the same area over and over again, something's going on.
And it's not just that area. There are other
No,
places that also have this. It's kind of really bizarre, unusual phenomena happening as well. Terry, I'm
yeah,
going to have to end our interview today. I so thank you for coming on. This has just been absolutely fascinating material that you've covered here today. Goes way beyond just Bigfoot, but it seems to me that Bigfoot must be tied in here somewhere, right?
I think so. And there's a connection. Again, I've seen things out looking for Bigfoot that were not Bigfoot, and you just have to understand. At that point, you just have to go, okay, if Bigfoot is real, this is real as well. I've got to accept this. I've got to figure out what's going on. So
Yeah.
I think we're seeing things that are all connected. We just don't understand the connections yet.
Exactly. I 100% agree with you. Well, I will let you know when this interview comes out.
Sounds great. I've appreciated it, and I hope your listeners enjoy it.
Oh, I'm sure they will. Thank you so much.